Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 8 of Salesforce Simplified. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside, and as always, I have Derek Cassese with me. Derek, let me get the commercial out of the way real quick. So, XenTegra is committed to helping people be successful with Salesforce, and that is not a small task. There is a lot to do, and we're going to talk about some stuff today that will be relevant to that topic. But we believe that there is an opportunity to raise the bar as a Salesforce partner for both the customer who has invested in the platform and Salesforce who has developed the platform. I say that as a customer of Salesforce and other partners, the opportunity to do it better is there because we've had to do it for ourselves. That's what led to starting the practice and bringing Derek on. Derek, what's the most exciting thing that you talked to a customer about in the last, last 5 business days, 7 days?
The most exciting thing, let's see. So I've talked to a customer. I had to explain what change sets were to a customer, and they didn't really understand what that was because they don't typically do that. So I got to explain to them why the importance of sandboxes as it pertains to an org, and I went and just showed them, and then had an aha. Like you could see the aha moment happen, and they're like, "Oh, that's what that is." Okay, cool. So, and they've had, multiple people in and out, and nobody's ever taken the time to explain that to them. So it was pretty
Well, you're
surprising.
just proving my point right there. And I wouldn't know what a change sets are either, but it kind of makes sense when you start talking about it. But not only is it an idea of knowing what it is, but also having some degree of holding yourself accountable to following the
Yeah.
process.
Yeah. Yeah. Now that'll be a podcast for a later date, is getting into change sets and the new DevOps Center, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So,
Let's see. So the topic you brought for today, 5 things architects should know about Einstein, written by Shashan Palesti.
Susanna.
Oh, Susanna. Sorry.
Yeah.
I
I believe it's
never heard
Susanna Plaisted. Yep.
that. Okay. And so Derek, this is good because I've been waiting, well, before you joined us, and now since you've been here, and I hear all this talk about generative AI, and I'm thinking that little Salesforce Einstein guy is finally going to be really relevant. And I think that's kind of what we're going to cover today is how this Einstein thing, which I love that Salesforce gives, these cartoon logo
Yeah.
characters to these techniques, these topics. And I love that Einstein is the AI one that's been around for a while, but now is going to actually start doing stuff for me, right?
Yeah. Big time. Yeah. I'm excited about it. As we go through this, it'll all start to make sense, but it's definitely really powerful. And it took me a little bit to really have my aha moment with this because sometimes in what we do, sometimes you see tech being done just to do it, and it's almost like, okay, that's cool, but I don't really need that. But this is different. This is like the generative AI capabilities that it's giving to the Salesforce platform is pretty transformational. So I'm pretty excited about it.
Yeah. And hopefully the business is going to see that all these years we've been trying to get them into a platform is going to pay off, and it's going to pay off exponentially. And I can't think of a better example than Einstein and Salesforce.
Yeah. 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 And part of what we're going to talk about too. So anybody that was at Dreamforce in September of last year, the big announcement was the Einstein One platform. So they're going, Salesforce is going full bore ahead with, AI as kind of their leading message to customers, and it brings along with it a lot of topics that we'll get into here.
Yeah. All right. The first topic is Einstein is hyper focused on trust. Derek, what does this mean and why is it relevant?
Yeah. So the number one value for Salesforce is trust. That's why they have trust.salesforce.com. By the way, in his books, Behind the Cloud, Benioff discusses how that was kind of groundbreaking at the time when they were like, you know what? Well, we're going to have outages. Why don't we just put it up there and be totally transparent about it? And I found that really fascinating. So anybody at any time can go to trust.salesforce.com and see if there's any issues with the platform. So trust is a very, very important piece to the relationship of Salesforce and their customers. And it's also really important when we get into like generative AI. because now we're in a situation where you got to understand all the moving pieces, right? And so what this is talking about is how it mentions that the core value is trust, but also that you've got this concept within the Einstein One platform, which is a rebranding of the Salesforce platform with a focus on AI. The and there's this thing called the Einstein trust layer, right? Which is it's a variety of apps and services that kind of come together that do things to protect the customer and their data and content. One of the things that it does is it can mask personal identifiable information, PII. So if it's sending, if you're sending your Salesforce data into a LMM, large language model, the specifics of me, like Derek Cassese, and anything that is personally identifiable can be masked, so that it's not actually being stored in that model. It's also hosted on Hyperforce, so that is the relationship of Salesforce and Microsoft, and it allows the use of generative AI without leaving the infrastructure, since Salesforce has moved the majority of orgs over to Hyperforce. So now you're actually able to leverage AI without leaving that infrastructure from within Hyperforce, of which has already been vetted, because that's where you're running your Salesforce platform anyway. So it's all kind of combined into this one single layer. And that's what they're calling the Einstein trust layer. It's a pretty important piece of this entire discussion. It says here, it also supports the use of external models. And this is really important too, right? So it only will, it's the use of external models that have agreed to a zero retention policy. So that's important, because what that means is companies like OpenAI that exist within the trust boundary of Salesforce, they're not if you're using their model, if you choose, hey, I want to use OpenAI, they have contracts and agreements that they're not saving any of your data to help train their model, right? So they're not retaining any of that. So where your data is going, how it's being used, that PII is being masked, and all this is kind of building that trust that you're giving Salesforce, so that you can then turn around and use this technology. They're also soon going to support bring your own model. So, there are customers out there that are building their large language models, and they can bring their own, right? And that's important because, and I'll just kind of go back a couple years. When I was at Salesforce, I got the opportunity to work with a team on the blockchain product, which I thought was really, really cool, very promising. But part of the issue was, like, what chain do you use? There's a lot of blockchains out there, and without going down that rabbit hole, I felt like that was part of the issue. And then, it subsequently phased out. But I think that this is being done correctly, where you're not locked into using one particular model when it comes to the LLM that you want to use for these technologies, right? And so all of this allows you to use this AI, right, that's being protected, and you've got a trust layer. But then they're adding this one magical piece that I'll see if this reminds you of anything, but it's the ability to keep the people in the loop that they're saying. So the ability to give your users the ability to give feedback on the responses from these models. So like a thumbs up, thumbs down, was this, a good response? And that feeds back into the system and helps refine what's being provided to the users of this
This
technology.
non-intrusive, real-time feedback model.
Yep.
Yeah, I think I've heard of that before. That's a joke, inside joke. People listening don't know what we're talking about. So Derek wanted to invent something similar about 10 years ago in the IT space, where it was just this constant little button you could hit on the screen saying, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy. Oh, I'm unhappy, I'm unhappy.
Yeah.
Something was worth, adding comments to, you could do it.
Yeah, it's just, it's a point in time. Like, if you collect feedback at the time the user experiences either a good experience or a bad experience, you're going to get really good feedback. But if you send a survey like 2 days later, it's not going to be that good, in my opinion. It's going to be, people forget, they may not even fill it out. So
They've
you
moved
know,
on. They're past the point of caring whether it was
yeah,
good or bad at that point.
exactly. Yeah.
Derek, the next section you talked about data cloud is a crucial part of the Einstein One platform. I think I've heard of people talking about data lakes and data clouds several times over the past week and how important it's going to be. Salesforce is offering up one that can be used certainly with its platforms and beyond, it seems like.
Yeah. And you'll also hear like a data lake house. That's another term that it will be passed around here. Um, that's a much deeper conversation as far as like data lake, data lake house, data lake being like very unstructured. I think I have that right. But anyway, what they're saying is like data cloud. So again, another really big announcement when we were at Dreamforce was that Salesforce was giving all their customers on particular versions and up. I think it was like enterprise and up. They were giving them free data cloud. And so free data cloud means free a certain number of credits, but free data cloud to start digging into that technology because it's a crucial aspect of this and that um, you know, all the data that you're going to be using for this generative AI is going to be collected and it's going to be sitting in the data in the data cloud platform, which is still part of the Salesforce platform. But it allows like extremely large like database sizes, right? And so you can basically get the performance of this stuff that you typically wouldn't have been able to do without data cloud. You can get the performance that you need. But all what they're saying here is that all their generative AI capabilities are built using data cloud infrastructure on Hyperforce, right? And so that's again, you're going to keep hearing this Hyperforce, which allows for extreme like petabyte scale data. So, you can ingest just an insane amount of data into data cloud and then, work with structured, unstructured data across this separate system. So for example, maybe you have data in ServiceNow. Maybe you have data in Salesforce. Maybe you have data in Microsoft. Maybe you have data in other areas, which you probably all do. You can have all of that in data cloud and then start generating these responses that know about all of that, which is that's pretty impressive, right? And it's very useful information to be able to just have a conversation, right, with this type of AI, and the fact that data cloud is this crucial part is what they're saying in this article is a key differentiator to what Salesforce is doing with AI, as opposed to some of these other companies might not. That might be, hey, go use Snowflake, go use something else. But this is kind of an all-encompassing solution for customers to really start embracing this. And so, and data cloud, it's interesting because we've already done a podcast on that, right? We went through all the names that's had. So if you're listening and you haven't heard that, you can go back and listen to that one, where we discuss the fact that it's not necessarily a brand new product. It's had a bunch of names, but it's evolved significantly from a use case and a reach perspective.
Derek, the next section is Einstein supports multiple models and its multi-module modal. Sorry, try again. Einstein supports multiple models and it's multimodal.
Yeah, that's kind of a weird thing. And real quick, also, before I jump into that, one thing I didn't mention as well is that one of the other features of Data Cloud, and this is really important, is the grounding piece of it. So, and what that means is you can ask a generative AI a question, and it may be very ambiguous when it comes back with a response. But if you've grounded it with like company name, like the data that you already have in Salesforce, right? You can feed it that information because it already has that information, and it can get a really, really refined response. So that's also another benefit of Data Cloud. But as far as what you're saying here, right? It's multiple models and multimodal, right? And what we talked about in the beginning was how they're not just locking you into a single LLM, right? It's not just the Salesforce hosted like code gen. I know that Anthropic, I always say that wrong. I think it's Anthropic or Cohere. There's a lot of them out there. There's a ton of them. But they, if they've established the trust with Salesforce, like OpenAI has, then you can leverage them within this type of an arrangement. They also say that if you developed your own, then you'll be able to connect it to Salesforce with your bring your own model capability. So, you know, what supporting multiple models is their core approach for AI. And what that allows you to do is use what you want, use the best of breed model, share them across your solutions, and then use those in when you build your prompts. And that's a whole nother discussion about prompt engineering, which is this new role that's been birthed out of generative AI. But it's the art of creating the prompts that you send to a generative AI model. And the more specific and the more information that you put into a prompt, the better the response is going to be for the user. And what Salesforce has is Prompt Studio, and different models will work with that. Does that make sense?
I just keep thinking every time I hear someone say that, that's where the whole prompt engineering skill set is going to come in. But yet it depends on what's behind the curtain as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing is that it's not even, I was reading this and I was like, this is kind of crazy, right? So it doesn't just support one modality of content generation, right? So when they say multimodal, it's not just generating text for an email. And that was something that I was joking with you when we were I was like, every demo I saw seemed to be like just generating an email, and then all of a sudden I saw them generate code in in Visual Studio Code for developers, which kind of blew my mind as a developer that can't stand having to come up with test classes. Like the ability to have this generate a test class is just, it's like Christmas morning. And then you can even have it generate configurations in Flow in Salesforce. So like, it's not just like, hey, so-and-so, I want to have a meeting with you. It's in different context within everything that's being done in the Salesforce platform, which is pretty impressive. And then here's where this gets really interesting. So the article goes in and says that it's, all of this becomes even more relevant when we prepare for autonomous agents. And I was like, oh, this is really cool, right? It's the next wave of AI, autonomous agents that leverage these LLMs. I always say LLMs, but not to predict the next word, right, or sentence, but to predict the next action. So just let that sink in for a minute. So let's just say you're having a conversation with Salesforce, Einstein, Copilot. Everybody seems to be using Copilot. And you're talking about, the example they said, let's just say we're talking about, you want to get this opportunity closed. Well, it may actually understand based on historical trending and all this, it may know what to do next, right? It may automatically set up tasks or create a campaign for you. But they basically say, as long as you've trained the agent on the types of tasks you need to reach your goal, then the AI will orchestrate, getting that done, right? There's always going to be the human in the middle.
Yeah.
So they kind of address the whole, like, this isn't going to replace people, but it's going to augment significantly.
Yeah, I know you said the word co-pilot's being, and I hate the fact it's being used everywhere, but it's the most applicable word where it's not in charge. It's just there to help and assist you.
Yeah. Yep. And they can't use assistant because that's been used everywhere, right? So I guess, that we'll probably see many name changes.
Well, I actually like Copilot because it really can fly the plane for you. But in general, you're going to fly the plane and you're going to make sure the Copilot's doing it right. You're not just, it's not just there to help you. It can actually do it, but you're you're going to make sure it's doing it right, or you're going to take over as needed.
Yeah, yeah, and and in here they reference another article because it says, again, like I said, Einstein Copilot isn't fully autonomous. There's still going to be humans in the loop, but to go deeper on it, there's another article about that, which links off of this blog, which is located on medium.com. So
All right, next topic here is Einstein will change the way we think about application lifecycle management.
Yep. Yeah. So, and this one, this is kind of an interesting one too. So as a architect or somebody designing a system, and I'm like this a lot too, right? I'm used to writing code and then creating tests, like I just mentioned, but I'm expecting a particular response. And if it's not that response, then the test fails. But with, you know, and that's a predictable result, right? And that's kind of why you test it. You need to have a predictable result based on inputs and all that good stuff. What they're saying here is that with generative AI, it's non-deterministic. So the response could be different every time the prompt is sent. It could just be a different answer, which is a reason why we can't guarantee that that answer is actually going to be what you want. It could be totally irrelevant based on how the system is set up, which is why all these tools are like with grounding and all that good stuff. You're trying to get it to be as close to relevant and what you're asking for, but it's not like as predictable as what we're used to, right? And so, when you think about application lifecycle, um, and unit testing, there's a whole concept of what they bring up here, which is this ethical review to make sure that like you understand to look at the use cases so that you understand what you're building, and how the AI is going to be used. Um, and then you build your templates with the prompts and you've tested them in the sandbox. You still need to think about the response because this is not like B equals C every time. A B equals C every time. It's non-deterministic. So what the rollout plan has to be such that you have a review, you develop, and then you roll it out to a pilot group, you get feedback, you fine tune, you roll it back out, you fine tune, and then you roll it out to the masses, which may not be the traditional way that you're doing, lifecycle management. And they have they have this generative AI release plan diagram in here, which, by the way, is in the format of well architected. So anybody that doesn't know about that, go to Salesforce Architects and read up on well architected. It's very interesting. But I digress. It talks about project definition, configure a test, pilot review, beta review, that type of stuff, right? So it is going to change the way you think about rolling out, net new applications and stuff like that.
Derek, section 5 here talks about has a consumption-based model. I hear a lot about how much it's going to cost and how much power is going to be used. How do people financially justify?
Yeah, so this is a different one too, especially because Salesforce has not been a consumption-based solution. Never has been until now. And so the way that Salesforce is doing it, which is kind of following along with the majority of the providers, is they use what they call credits, and they're consumed on the length of the prompts sent into the LLM, the outputs generated back. So depending on how complex or not complex and how complex the answer is or not, you'll be using a certain number of credits. And that's what Salesforce has given to all customers to play with. They've given them a certain number of credits to just kind of get used to it. And it's really that's real high level as far as so you would buy a certain number of credits based on what you want to do, but that is a conversation I have with with a partner like us and in conjunction with the Salesforce team to really dig into what you're trying to do so that you size that appropriately, because I know that there are things you can do that use up a lot of credits, and then there are simple imports that don't. And so it's really important to understand that. It's kind of out of scope for this discussion because that gets really into the weeds on the licensing of it. But I think the takeaway here is that unlike everything else, this is a consumption-based setup when it comes to data cloud, and it's something to be aware of.
And then Derek, bringing it all together, right? The conclusion of why people should be interested in AI, specifically as it relates to Salesforce. I'll just kind of tee that
Yeah.
up from my perspective. It's super easy because, well, maybe I'm just been living in the sales and marketing world too long, but there's so much we could do more efficiently and better in both marketing and sales that Salesforce to me is a platform that there's a lot to be accomplished because you can never come close to doing it all. AI is going to get us a chance to do more better.
And yeah, and faster and more efficiently. And yeah, I mean, the overall takeaways of this are, those 5 points, right? It's built on a trusted framework with data cloud in the middle, supporting multiple models in different areas of what you do, right? That's that multimodal setup. And it's different. So it needs to be thought of as different. So with the application lifecycle stuff, that's different. And the licensing is different. So that, all this stuff needs to be taken into account. But it's important to understand these things because this is going to be, in my opinion, this is going to be the differentiator between the customers that are able to move quickly and get ahead of their competition faster and sell more and build more pipeline and be successful. Because if you think about it, I don't know if you've ever written or wrote a report in Salesforce. What do you're not sitting there staring at your screen because you want to write a report. You're sitting there spending time doing that because you want an answer to something, whatever that may be.
Yeah.
Imagine if you just literally, like, if you had somebody that knew all the answers, knew everything in your Salesforce environment, and you could just say, hey, how many customers have done this in the past 90 days versus last year? And they were able to give you that answer in like literally 30 seconds or 10 seconds. Imagine what you could do like that, right? And that's an easy example. Imagine just saying, hey, create a funny email for my focused customers about last week's event and send it in a week. Just stuff like that, right? I mean, and I mean, you could think of all these different use cases, and that's really just making one individual more efficient. And so, and those are just really high level. I mean, there's a lot of other use cases for this. The ability to just have conversations with the data, I think, is really fascinating. And we do that a little bit in analytics, but not to this level. And then when you bring in other systems, it gets really, really interesting. So, you could talk about, hey, let's just say you have projects going on that are stored in ServiceNow and assets, but yet you also have open opportunities. And you could just say, what is the status of company ABC's project? And is that going to potentially cause issues with any open opportunities? Boom. And then it gives you all those answers and correlates what's happening. Right. And all those, the way that you ask those questions are the prompts, and those prompts are grounded with your data. Like nobody else's data isn't coming from some, manufactured set of artificial data. It's coming from your actual data that you created in Salesforce. So it's fascinating stuff. I think it's going to change the way that these tools are used. There are going to be those that embrace it. There are going to be those that don't, and time will tell who gets left behind on some of this stuff. But this stuff is here. It's here to stay.
Yeah, this is my third podcast of the day. Every single one of them talked about AI and where it's going. This has to be so applicable. We talked about crypto and things like that weren't really real. They are real, but they're not as applicable. This is applicable everywhere. You helped me out immensely just now with the idea that I'm going to be able to just tell Salesforce what I want for a report instead of having to go through and figure out all the filters myself. And then have to go back days and days afterwards. Go, oh, I should have made the filter like this, not that. At least at the minimum, get me a good starting point.
Yeah, just have a conversation with it, right? I mean, reports are just a tool because you want to get an answer to something. That's the only reason you have a report. And then filters are just because, you want that in different ways. But those things this is a much, much better user interface to the same data that those reports are running on.
Yeah.
Right. So it's, and the other interesting piece of this is that, Salesforce Like you could be five employee customer on Salesforce with Sales Cloud, and you could use the same AI capabilities that 100,000 employee company is using. And so it's getting this technology in the hands of anybody that wants to use it, leveling the playing field. And I think that's, it's not like, hey, you need $2.3 million to use this stuff. You don't.
Well, funny you said leveling the playing field. My visual that I was coming up in my head is it's like that show, are you smarter than a fifth grader, and having the ability to have phone a friend for every single question they ask and how much the likelihood of getting it right would be. Except you're not phoning a friend, you're phoning your most intelligent friend you could ever have.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. And that's just that's just the like where you have a question and you need an answer use case, right? Yeah. It's not the the harder ones where it's like, hey, make sure that we don't have any duplicates in here. And if we do have duplicates, let me know why and when was it created and who, all that stuff. There's so much you can do that, it is kind of like the sky's the limit, but there are limits right now. So, and there's limits just, it's still evolving. It's still new. Some of the stuff is new, like pilot, like the prompting and all that stuff is new, but the idea is to embrace this and not be afraid of it, be educated on it, understand that there's trust behind the way Salesforce is doing it. And, underneath it all, though, is the data. Really important. People start thinking now about their data. And data integrity might, maybe this is a little sneak peek, but data integrity might be a topic of another discussion.
well, it's core to the whole thing.
Yep.
Derek, I appreciate it. What did we not cover that you would want to add maybe to this topic, if anything?
Just that if anybody's listening to this that is a Salesforce customer that didn't realize they have some data cloud, if they're on like enterprise or up, to reach out, because you do, and we can help you do a quick pilot or understand what you've got.
Yeah, I mean, going back to my previous commercial I talked about in the very beginning, we need to help you. I don't care who you are. There's opportunities to have a discussion, to at least discuss where a value-added partner who's in it for the right reasons might be able to help with your Salesforce current and future implementations, including data cloud and AI-related technologies that are they're coming. Period. They're coming, and as Derek pointed out, you've got to be prepared and get your team prepared to use them, because if you don't, you're going to be getting behind instantly.
Yeah. And also, I will say, a lot of this stuff is new, right? And so if you're listening and I said something that may not be that you don't agree with, I'd love to hear that too, because we're all learning here, right? And so further conversations on these topics are welcome. I would enjoy that, because as these things evolve, it's hard to keep up with. And that's, part why we do these podcasts, to help people just, in the car or wherever you are, listen to this stuff and just get some of it. But again, we're, a lot of this stuff is new and coming out as we go about our day throughout these years. It's 2024 right now. So it'd be interesting to listen to this in 5 years and see how much it's changed.
And it will. We'll get it wrong, but it won't be for lack of trying to connect the dots.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, sir. Thank you. And we'll do this again in 2 weeks.
All righty.